I'm Chad Fletcher of Superior Artisan Wood Slab, acronym SAWS. So I initially got into the business somewhat by accident and somewhat by necessity. We were getting ready to build a home and I was always interested in sawmilling, at which point I purchased a small manual bandsaw mill to do some custom work inside my house. It wasn't too long after that I was doing a little bit of side work with it. And then, probably a year or so later, my 20-year career in a completely different industry was waning, somewhat coming to an end. And I decided I was enjoying sawmilling, so I sold that sawmill, bought a larger bandsaw mill, which gave me a larger production capabilities, also mobile sawing capabilities. And that there was the birth of our business. We were noticing a demand for processing huge timber in our area. My longtime friend, Alan Murphy, and now business partner, was interested in maybe a little side work at the time. And it just so happened that he had some large timber recently downed on his place. So that sort of pushed us into our current sawmill, which is the Lucas Model 830. On this sawmill, we're capable of processing large timber. By way of its swing blade action, we can process dimensional lumber, and then we use the slabber attachment to process wide plank slabs as wide as 5 feet. This is a Lucas Model 830. 8 is in reference to the max width cut, 30 is reference to the motor. So they call this a 30 horsepower motor. I don't know if you saw recently, we did a huge log over at what is actually Tammy Wynette's home place over in Itawamba County. The log was so large so that we had to have the frame up on several sets of cinder blocks to be able to make the opening cut on the log. You've got a sawyer, an experienced sawyer who's really kind of into what's going on here. You can really wear your tail man out in a hurry trying to tail all the lumber to keep up with the mill.
So how many logs, typical size logs, can you do in a setting today?
Oh man, if we're going to say process, if we're going to process average size logs like that, God, I don't even know. Because most of our stuff is huge timber these days. But I don't know, we could process 20 of those. Yeah. You know, and we're not geared for production. We're more geared for specialty stock and quality stock, so it's not a production game for us. Smaller logs, this mill can become cumbersome because it's built to handle big logs. It'll process small logs. But if you've got, say, 12, 14-inch logs that you're primarily going to be dealing with, you'd probably be better suited on a bandsaw mill. It's a little easier setup to set up each log and keep things rolling quicker. So it takes us a minute to set each log into this frame. One, you've got to physically set it in here or have a piece of equipment to do it with, and then by the nature of how it's designed, you have to get the log and the mill aligned in perfect harmony to produce the best lumber.
So for something like that massive log right there, you put the mill around the log.
Yeah, right. So logs, if we don't have equipment to move a log that size, then we can. I mean, this thing breaks down. We just set it right over where the log is laying. The other advantage that a swing blade mill has over, say, a bandsaw mill. So on a bandsaw mill, the first thing you have to do with a log is make it into a square cant before you can begin making lumber, which means you're going to turn the log 3 times to get cut 4 sides of it. And then you're going to run through the log, saw down to the bed, and you're going to kind of get what you get. Whatever's in there is what you're going to get. Where by this, there's no log turning. As soon as you open a face, then you immediately begin pulling boards out because of the swing blade action, right?
Yeah.
So you're immediately pulling boards out. You're not turning the log, so you're saving time there. And also, as you're working right here over the face of the log. So say, for instance, you're cruising along here and you see this old limb pocket, and if you don't want that in your board, you just make a narrow pass, pull that out, and then begin making your, say, 6-inch board, 8-inch board, or what have you. Versus the bandsaw mill, once it's a square cant, whatever is in there is in your wood.
Yeah.
So you can kind of pick your cuts as you're going, and you're working right here over the face where you can see what's happening. Like say for instance, this log is a little bit crooked, and knowing that, I can saw accordingly to try and keep these boards as straight as I can, right? So I can read the grain pattern from here where I'm sawing and try to plan my cuts to where I'm going to yield the best lumber I can, versus bandsaw mill, you're just going to get what you get after it's a squared cant, and you're going to saw all the way down to the deck. 8-inch wide is the max. We can actually do a 16-inch wide cut, but it requires what's called a double cut. You'd cut 8 inches this way, physically turn the mill head around, run your 8 inches the other way, which is not a lot of fun. So when we brought the Lucas mill on board into our operation, it really opened the door to process large timber, which is not easy to find in our area. There's not a lot of people that can handle that type of stuff. So there's likely not a log in the southeast United States that we can't process on this mill. As a result of that, we do a fair amount of work with large timber. We're both mobile in our operation, as well as people can drop logs here at our place to have them processed. We found ourselves in the next progression of business as a result of processing large timber. Obviously, people needed a way to dry these pieces that we're now processing. As we looked into kiln drying units and different kiln technologies, we settled upon the vacuum style kiln, as it's really the single best way to dry thick, wide pieces of lumber. Completely sterilizes your lumber, right? So if there's ever a question of bugs, even saying like old reclaimed stuff, like we bought that hand-hewed cabin from Arkansas, 1850s hand-hewed cabin, there could be termites in that stuff or what have you. So, we can just run a sterilization cycle on this. As long as you get the core of the wood up to 140 degrees for 2 hours, then your lumber is completely sterile. And so the advantage to the iDry vacuum kiln, again over traditional kiln technology, is we can get that temperature up really quickly and sterilize all the lumber. So not only is we're producing dry lumber, we're producing quality sterilized, guaranteed bug-free lumber. Even in old reclaimed stuff that someone might want to bring us. If you're building a new house and you're going to use some reclaimed timbers, the last thing you want to do is maybe introduce pests potentially. So we can pop it in here, run a sterilization cycle, guaranteed pest-free lumber at the end of the day. Alan, you want to do any chit-chatting?
Anybody understand?
The chamber is in essence a huge stainless steel insulated box. You have this set of tracks that the lumber carriage rolls onto, so you stack your lumber, stick or stack your lumber, roll your carriage in on these tracks. In behind that stainless steel bulkhead is a large stainless industrial fan that cycles both forward and reverse. So it runs for 2 hours in one direction, and then it switches directions and runs the opposite direction to promote the best airflow possible in the stack of lumber. On either side of the fan and behind the bulkhead is a series of electric heating elements, and that's how the heat is generated. So heating elements, air movement, air circulation, all the moisture that's pulled out of the lumber while the kiln is under vacuum is in a gaseous state until the electric solenoid opens up once a day on its own. At that point, the gaseous liquid, water coming out of the wood, turns into condensation, which then drips down to the kiln floor, and it just falls right out the drain in the back.
And that's what this pipe is.
And that's what that pipe is. Yeah, so there's a break in the track system, so the door can be open all the way. and then you just pop these bridges on. So that's going to bridge from your carriage track all the way into the kiln track. Maximum load capacity on this model is 2,000 board feet. You can squeeze 2,000 board feet in there if it's all just the right length and it's all dimension lumber and you have a nice neat stack. You can maximize 2,000 feet in there. We've been running loads of mixed with dimensional lumber and slab lumber. So we're finding we're getting 1,400 to 1,500 board feet in a load. If we play the ultimate game of Tetris and get as much stuff stacked in here as we can. To be able to maximize the volume in the kiln. Jim Parker at iDry, he's second generation in vacuum kiln technology. From what I understand, his dad began importing vacuum dryers years ago and then selling and servicing them. So best of my knowledge, Jim's sort of well versed with these things, but he's spent a lot of time and resources into developing the iDry product specifically. And it's all computer operated, and they do all of their programming in-house. So the control panel here tells you everything you need to know. It gives you the current air temperature inside the kiln, current pounds of mercury inside the kiln, so 30.1, which is where we're standing today. And again, the vacuum will bring that all the way down to 7 pounds of mercury. But it's capable of going back through, tells you what's happening right now, 0 vacuum pressure, 0 water going through the cooling pump, no heat active, no fans running. Obviously, we're not running right now.
Have you done much electricity monitoring for how much it uses?
We have a general vague idea right now. We want to put an inline kilowatt meter on the unit itself so that we can know exactly the power consumption on each load, because every load is going to vary a little bit depending on the species, the initial moisture content, the thickness, right? So they're all going to dry maybe faster or slower than the other. So we'd like to be able to put a direct meter right here on the line so we know exactly the power consumption of each load every time.
And that'll also be better business, so you know the true cost.
Nothing worse than guessing your way through business, right? So we have the tent around the unit just to keep the temperature up inside of here on cold nights. So, it is an electronically heated system, and ultimately you want the ambient air temperature to be above freezing to get the best performance out of the kiln unit. Where we're staying today, the pounds of mercury, the pressure is probably 29.9 or so. Outer space is 0 pounds of mercury. It sucks the vacuum chamber down to 7 pounds of mercury, which allows water to boil at a much lower temperature than it typically would, say, at your stovetop. This is why the iDry can dry, 1, very quickly, and 2, dry lumber very high quality with very little degrade. Not only do we sawmill lumber and dry lumber, if a client has their own lumber that they need dried, we offer that service here at our sawmill as well. In continuing with the theme of trying to meet the demand of our markets, we've brought in a line of exotic hardwood lumber. Prior to our doing that, any clients in our area that were in the market for exotic hardwood lumber would have to drive maybe 90 miles one way or the other. So now then we offer sawmilling service, kiln drying service, as well as exotic hardwood lumber and domestic hardwood lumber for sale. Even if you're not local to our area, you can still participate in the fun. We do project packs shipped to your door for a very cheap rate, very good quality lumber. If you're interested in our services or any of our products, please check out our website, give us a call, or find us on any of the social media platforms. Thanks so much.